Hello, hello, hello. Raise your hand high if you have ever done or have ever considered doing a 200-hour yoga teacher training. I ask because I have been taking a trip down memory lane and reminiscing on my very first 200-hour yoga teacher training for a couple of reasons. First, it's because I just celebrated my, I guess, anniversary, you would call it, of doing my first 200-hour yoga teacher training 14 years ago. So I just celebrated my 14th anniversary of not only doing my first 200-hour yoga teacher training, but actually of teaching. I started teaching pretty immediately. I know that's not always the case for everyone who does a teacher training, but it was for me. And another reason why I am reminiscing is because we will be offering another 200-hour yoga teacher training at Tower Yoga starting at the top of this next coming year. And we'll be even doing an info meeting tonight, if you're listening to this podcast on the day it was released, at the Lotus Room from 6 to 7 p.m. But we'll also have it recorded so a link can be sent to you if you're listening to this, well after the date it was released. But I like to reminisce a little bit every time we go on the journey of offering another 200-hour teacher training. And this one was really, I didn't realize like how far back it was going to take me, because I think like the depth of going down memory lane has just been more immersive this time around, because I was like kind of looking back at like the teacher who had guided that, looking back at the facility where it was held. I was looking at some old pictures and things like that, which I haven't done for reasons I don't think we have enough time today to start parsing out. But yeah, it hit me and it's hitting me. I feel it. So I feel excited to share my story. I have done several teacher trainings. And so sometimes when I look back at my history, I look back at it as like a whole. And it's really cool to just focus on this like one particular training, because it obviously was the most transformational, because it was like the doorway or the gateway that opened this world to me in a big, big way. I had been practicing yoga for a handful of years. I'd even been working in a yoga studio, kind of cleaning and doing the front desk well before I did a teacher training. And so I had been practicing not only in like group classes regularly, but also in workshops and attending things where even outside teachers or even like experts, you'd call them, in their niche within the industry of yoga and wellness had come and come into the studio that I was a part of. And so I felt like by the time I went to do my first teacher training, I felt like I had a pretty good like window into like what I was getting myself into, but I was actually very naive about that in the best way possible. Overwhelming, but beautiful way. So let's back it up a bit. I was 21. I was living with my boyfriend at the time and his best friend. I was going to Fresno City College. I was also working at Coil yoga studio, and I was working at World Market. Yes, World Market. That's right. And doing my thing and trying to like ride my bike and hike and do all these other things in between. But that's where I was at. And I had graduated with my AA from Fresno City, and I had been kind of dragging my heels a little bit on getting things in order to transfer to Fresno State. I felt really in this predicament that I know that the thing that you do after you go to a community college is transfer over to a state college or some other university and like you finish your degree and then you get your job and like that's the way that it goes, right? But that never appealed to me, and I think that is for a lot of reasons. I have probably explained to some of you in person, or I've maybe said this in the origin story somehow, I don't know, but I never liked school. It never clicked for me. I was never into it. Like starting in first grade, I told my parents I didn't want to go. They said too bad, and I was like, all right, let's get through this. So even the fact that I had like gone to city and like finished the AA was like wild to me. So I was dragging my heels because I just couldn't see myself getting into debt to finish school to get a degree for a job that like I didn't even know what it was. And I definitely didn't want it because I didn't even know what it was. The thing is when I talked to the counselor at Fresno City, she was like, you can go a few different ways with this. I was the only thing I was remotely interested in when I did go to City College was, well, I liked badminton and like some of the PEs and things, but I was really interested in all of my philosophy classes, like world religion. I even liked like logic and reason. There was like some other sort of like pre-law courses that, I remember, or like those were prereqs to kind of go towards law. And I did like some of that sort of stuff. Uh, I was philosophy was what it was. There was like morals and ethics. I thought that was really interesting. And so she was like, you can get your degree in philosophy. You could go into law. You could become a writer. You could become a teacher. And I was just like, man, all those things just seem like more school, like school, school, school. And then my job's going to be like in school, or I'm going to be a writer and there's just be all these deadlines. And I don't want any of this, you know? So I realized I liked learning, and I liked learning about things that I was really, really interested in, but I I wasn't sold on going into debt to finish a degree on a job that I just wasn't sold on. And uh so I decided I talked to my parents. And, pretty much they're hardworking people and they were not in the position to really, I think, pay for college in the first place, let alone pay for me to go to school when I wasn't very convinced or convincing that it was going to like pay them back somehow. So we all agreed, yeah, like let's, take some time, like let's take a year to kind of figure things out and we'll go from there. So I decided, well, you know what? Within this year, something I could do, and I know I really want to do, is do a yoga teacher training. It's something that I thought about for a long time. I just didn't know how to make that happen with like financially or even time wise, and I just thought, okay, well, this is definitely going to be the time. And my parents were like, we can give you like half of what your teacher training will cost or a teacher training will cost because I didn't know which one I was going to do at the time. And then you'll need to call your nana and ask your nana for the other half. And I remember being like, thank you so much. And also like terrified to call my nana because I never did that before. I never called her and asked for money. And I just remember feeling like nervous, but also like I know that it's so important. I know I really want to do this and I got to figure out how to make this happen. And so like the worst she can say is no. I called her. And part of why I think I was nervous is just because like she didn't understand like yoga and like my passion for the yoga practice and all that kind of stuff. But I remember when I called, she said that she had started like doing a couple chair yoga classes in her town, like in her tiny little town in Texas where she lived, and that was like helping her a lot and stuff. And so like I had an in and we connected through there, and she said yes. So I was like, okay, cool, awesome. Like I have the time, I have the money, and now I just need to like figure out where I'm going to go. So 14 years ago, it was a totally different world, y'all. There wasn't a million choices. They definitely weren't, it wasn't common to see one that fit your life as a person who has a job and a family. And they definitely were like less likely to be offered in your town. I think there might have been one that was offered around the time that I looked into. It was called Yoga for Living. And I actually knew someone who did that training, one of my dear friends. And it was like you would go once a month for the whole weekend or something like that. And uh, theirs wasn't, they didn't have another one being offered for like a long time. I remember they had like just started one when I started looking, and so it would be a long wait. So I was like, okay, well, that's not going to work. And I just was looking and looking, and then my friend, who I had known from just different social circles, I also happened to work with her at Coil Yoga. We were on Karma Crew together. We both did desk, like check-in stuff. And she was like, hey, I'm going to move. I'm moving to the Bay Area. I'm starting school at San Francisco State in the fall, but this summer I'm going to be taking a teacher training. And like, I know you're interested in it. You should do this one with me. So it was a no-brainer. Honestly, I was like, absolutely, I'm going. This is the one I'm doing. Like, it's within my price range. It's happening in a handful of months. I can do this. So I talked to my boyfriend at the time, and we were like, okay, yep, cool, that's fine. I remember talking to my boss at my job at World Market, and she was like, you need a month off? Like, that's crazy, But somehow I convinced her to give me a whole month off and did that. And I was 21. I was 21 when all this was going down. And lo and behold, life happens as it does. I go in for a doctor's appointment because I just been feeling really fatigued, extremely tired, very, very, very tired. And I wasn't sure what was like happening. And I go in for a doctor's appointment, and turns out I'm 6 weeks pregnant. I'm like 6 weeks. I'm very early on. I remember like the walls closing in on me. I was by myself in the doctor's office, and I got in my car. I drove to like a Walgreens and got a bunch of pregnancy tests and went home and took them all and took one after the other, and they were all positive, 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 positive. So I freaked out, and I was like, okay, I have this teacher training starting mid-July. All right, let me remind you, this all happened to me, or for me, early June. So I'm like, okay, think. What's going to happen? So my boyfriend at the time and I decide, okay, like, yeah, like, let's do this thing. It's not something that we're really ready for, but we'd been together for like 4 years. We knew we loved each other. We weren't sure that we were quite ready for starting a family, but we were both in. And so we decide like, yeah, this is going down. So I just meditate on it, and I'm like, I'm still going to go and do this teacher training, and I'm just going to do it pregnant, and hopefully I feel okay, and hopefully, it all works out. So I make up my mind. My birthday passed. I turned 22 at the end of June, and I don't know why that detail was important, I guess, but I turned 22, and then I start my first day of yoga teacher training on July 18th. So this teacher training was at Brahmananda Ashram. It's an urban ashram in San Francisco, in the Mission. It was an ashram that was developed, not the actual property it was on, but, like the Yoga Society of San Francisco uh, helped facilitate this specific ashram to come into existence, like back in the 70s. It's an ashram that's also open to the public for Vedic fire ceremonies in the morning, for like satsang gatherings where people can talk about yogic philosophy and things like that. Certain evenings, there's kirtans, that devotional chanting, call and response style. So there's all these different things that happen there. I'm really excited. And there were a few options to stay there, or you could stay anywhere you wanted and then just like take the BART or the Muni Inn or whatever into the ashram every single morning. So I had a friend, a really good friend from high school who lived in San Francisco. Didn't live in the Mission, lived outside of it, maybe in Sunset or something. And I stayed with her, and I would just, take the Muni in every morning so early. And it was an intensive style. So it was 1 month straight, day in and day out. I think we got some free time on Saturdays, and they were very, very full days. And I can kind of even give you an example of the schedule momentarily. But yeah, so just to backtrack, I go to this ashram. It's day one. I remember feeling very nervous. Like, am I going to be able to physically like meet the demands of this schedule? It's a big undertaking. And I remember feeling really, really scared to tell the teacher trainer. And I don't know. This training was an Ashtanga Vinyasa, and it's just kind of a little bit of a rigid practice. It's very like male dominated, and like the teacher himself, I don't know, has this kind of very I want to like be careful with my words. I don't know why, but a very stern, like masculine, not in a bad way, like a good way, like sturdiness about him. So a little more on like the cold side than the warm side. So I don't know. I was like nervous to tell him that I was pregnant, to think like he was going to kick me out or something. You know what I mean? Like a pregnant girl isn't welcome here, you harlot, or something like that. These are all my own judgments. I'm not putting that on him per se, but I told him. He did look really shocked and surprised, but was like, took a minute and was like, okay. And I don't know if maybe he never had someone who was pregnant in one of his trainings before. And it is something to like consider. And there are all kinds of accommodations that have to be made. And, it's it's another like challenge, as someone who's put on tons of teacher trainings. Every time that you're met with an accommodation, it's like, in my opinion, it's so exciting, like something that you're gonna have to accommodate someone in a different way than you've had to before. It's very exciting, and it's like you're having to sort of expand and like think in different ways than you have before. And while it's exciting, it can also be like, whoa. So I imagine he was going through some of that. But right away he's like, you're going to be so excited because there is a huge prenatal portion. There's a module all like, and someone's coming in. I'm having my friend who's a doula and midwife come in, and you're going to be really excited, and we're going to like take really good care of you. So I was like, okay, great. Like, this is so cool. And that was that. So I started teacher training 22 and pregnant, pretty newly pregnant, honestly. And I'm just looking back, I have my receipt. I remember going to pay for the training on the first day. I brought cash. There was no Venmo and stuff like that then. I brought cash in an envelope, and there was like this ashram was beautiful and had this like beautiful resonance of like steeped in spiritual things. You could feel it. And then there was this office that I stepped into that had like books and deities and just like, you know, yantras, and really it was so cool. And I walk in, I'm looking around, I'm expecting there to be like someone at the front desk, and it's literally just this like huge Persian cat sitting in like the chair where there would normally be like a receptionist or something at this desk that just has like papers all over it and like books. And I'm like, okay, like this is an interesting place. It was also really kind of cool. There was one teacher, there was one um, guru who had been in between India and at this ashram in San Francisco, who had just left his body like not that long before. And so I don't know, there was just something so like intensely like psychedelic about like feeling, I should say, feeling like a psychedelic feeling about the whole center. And so I was like, I'm going to love this place. This is like right up my alley. And I'm like weirded out in the best way. But I did eventually, get a human, I guess, because I have a receipt here. Green Path Yoga, 2872 Folsom Street, San Francisco, California. greenpathyoga.org. Student name Kellee Williams. Date 7/18/2010 through 8/18/2010. Service yoga teacher training. Amount paid $2,245. That's how much an average teacher training would run you 14 years ago. So, yeah, things are different now. uh, so that is fun to see that receipt. But yeah, we get into it, and I am just like off to the races on this journey. There is a schedule, like a sample schedule. From 7:30 to 8:15, we had a Vedic fire ceremony and morning meditation. They did a Vedic fire ceremony every single morning. That was also open to the public. So all of us from training would be there, and then people from the community would come in. From 8:15 to 10 a.m., there was asana and breath work. 10 a.m. was breakfast. 11 a.m. to 11:30 was karma yoga. We all got assigned something a little different to help maintain the ashram's cleanliness. So my duties, I wrote it down, was the downstairs bathroom and to help Scarlett with the office. And, being newly pregnant and feeling like slightly, if not a lot, sensitive to smells and scents, being around all the different body odors all day and some of the other essential oils and things that us yogi folk like to put on was very interesting. There's also signs in all the bathrooms, and you see this, I feel like, when you go to a lot of like spiritual centers and stuff, is if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. Well, sometimes I'd go in to clean that downstairs bathroom, and there would just be like so much pee, and the smell, I just can't even. So I do think that I had to plug my nose that whole time, but your girl got it done. Let's see. After that, 11:30 to 12:15 was yoga philosophy and Sanskrit class. From 12:15 to 1 was more yoga philosophy and chanting. From 1 to 1:45 was a light lunch. 2 to 3:30, lecture and discussion. 3:30 to 4, afternoon tea on the garden and the sun deck. 4 to 5:50 was asana technique and anatomy. 6:30 was dinner. 7:30 to 8 was Vedic fire ceremony and evening meditation. And that was, again, something that the public would also be invited into, along with us trainees. And then 8 to 9 was evening program. So that's kirtan, chanting, things like that. And then it just shows like all the little exceptions and things like that on my schedule. So it was a full day. It was from 7:30 to 9 every single day. And mind you, I would be getting on the public transit to get there before. So I was up at like, 5 a.m., 4:45 probably. And then I wasn't getting home until like 10, and then like winding down and doing that again. And like 22, and like in San Francisco, and pregnant. But I was just so dead focused on this. I really was. I just was on such a mission, for it. In the mission. Haha, see what I did there? So something that I remember really, really feeling a little nervous about was like, was I going to be able to like keep up with the demand of these days? But somehow I did. I will try to share like on Instagram maybe a picture. Like I did dig up a photo of me. There was also other people, but like me taking a nap like on a bolster with like all of my teacher's training stuff everywhere all around at teacher training. So I did try to sneak in like little cat naps and stuff like that. Something that was really cool is I would go in if we had little breaks and take quick naps in the guru, the one who had just passed. His room was like still intact, and I would go in his room and sleep in there. And I would have like these really cool dreams where I was actually communicating with Star, who's my now 13-year-old. I would like communicate with her, and I communicated with the guru. This is gonna like freak some of you out, I guess. Whoops. Oh well. And I would like have questions I'd be like having on my heart all day, and then they would kind of get answered, or there would be like a clue for me within that dream to like seek next. And it was like a really cool way to get some rest, and then to also get some like deep intel from other realms. So that would happen. But you know what? Like I figured it out. And there was even some days, and this is totally great, like I love it, but like maybe someone would be on their period and you wouldn't see them in asana practice and stuff like that. Or there'd be some days where someone was just like feeling a little under the weather and they would like sit out of the asana practice, but just kind of like take notes. And I was totally ready to allow myself to do that anytime I needed to, but I just didn't. I didn't. And it's just funny because I thought, oh, I'm like here, the pregnant one. And like, I'm just, like I can barely keep up with this breath work because like I can't take such deep breaths right now because of like what my body's going through. And I just, all these hormones are going crazy. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to like, keep up with all this, but like, I just did, and I just could. And that was like so really, really cool. Uh, I think in a 200-hour yoga teacher training, you have to have the ego. And I use that in a really, in like a good way, like a healthy ego. You have to have a healthy enough ego to feel confident enough to say, I do feel like I know enough to potentially become a yoga teacher. Or I do feel like I know enough to go through a training, period. There has to be that as like a baseline, a healthy enough ego to be able to withstand deciding to go through an intense experience like a teacher training, to say, I can make it through that. I have what it takes to go through that process, whether I teach or not, actually. But I just happen to like be like, and I'm going to teach, I know it. And, you might be there, or you might be in the other camp of being like, well, I know I could make it through, I just don't know if I could teach. But you do have to start at a baseline of being like, I know I have what it takes to like go through that journey. And so that was there for sure, even though I share some of those reservations of like where I was at. But I think also if you were to really, really understand the amount in which you don't know before doing a 200-hour teacher training, it would or could potentially completely overwhelm you. So maybe it's just good to like stick with that like little bit of naivety, like I got what it takes. And I say this because I was completely unprepared for the realization of how little I actually knew. I was like, oh my gosh, at certain points, I'm like, why am I even here? Like, why did I even think I was like remotely ready for this? Because this training completely opened so many different doors and avenues and gates and worlds to me that I had no idea about. I thought it was going to be something that would actually just establish me deeper into things I already knew. And I think now, in retrospect, 14 years later, every teacher training I do now is definitely that. Plus, I might learn some new things too. But I'm at the point in my like learning journey where a lot of things are starting to not feel so completely like new and yeah, just new. I'm establishing deeper and deeper and deeper. So I'm going deeper rather than wider. As for when I did my very first 200-hour teacher training, I just went really wide. And that is what a 200-hour yoga teacher training is about. It is about deepening your personal practice, yes, of course, but also widening your scope and your lens to the degree in which you absolutely need in order to even just guide a basic class. So what I thought was that I was going to be deepening into stuff that I knew. What I got was I was actually getting my perspective widened in ways that I had no idea about, if that makes sense. And now I know that is that is what a 200-hour yoga teacher training is. It is complete like exposure, getting exposed to so many different facets of what yoga is. And that's what happened. So, I don't like I'm looking through my binder right now, which is like so old, and just to see my old handwriting and that kind of stuff is like really cool. But, there was asana, there was the Sanskrit. We learned about all kinds of different pranayamas, breath work. We learned about drishti points, like where you look in all the postures. We learned about hand mudras. We learned all kinds of chants. We got deeper into Sanskrit. We, of course, got into sequencing. We got into, we got into Ayurveda. We got into Ayurveda, which is the kind of that sister science of yoga. And I explained this a little bit on the water element episode, but this is the first time I knew about Ayurveda. I knew about the practice of Ayurveda as like a ancient, like wisdom and medical system of India. I knew that it approached healing through like holistic modalities that really went hand in hand with your yoga practice and all these kinds of things. And, but I didn't realize there was going to be a huge module on Ayurveda in this training, and there was, and it was like, I was so all in. I don't know if you have ever come across a subject or a teaching or something where you were just like, it resonated so deeply that you just like couldn't get enough, and you knew it was going to be a huge part of your like life. This was that for me, and I totally did not expect that. So we went deep into Ayurveda, and I thought, okay, this is something that I am so happy that I've been exposed to. But it's like everything in a 200-hour yoga training is like a 101. It's like the basics. And it's, again, it goes really wide. And then what we have the opportunity as students to do is what really spoke to me, and how do I continue my education in that route? And where do I take this? And how do I go deeper? So to expect your 200-hour yoga teacher training to be like an in-depth study in any like one area outside of sequencing for the most part, and like just making sure that you can teach a safe and cohesive and coherent like yoga asana class, like is an unrealistic expectation. Not to say you're not going to get a lot and you're not going to go deep on some things, but like there isn't necessarily like you're not going to get and become an expert in meditation from doing a 200-hour teacher training. Or like I couldn't have expected to become a so in depth and be an expert in Ayurveda because it was like a module in my 200-hour teacher training. No, I got exposed to it. It was something that spoke to me. I ended up doing a 500-hour teacher training in Ayurveda specifically after this. So then that's how I went deeper with it. I wouldn't have been exposed to it if it wasn't an option in my training. And then, you know, a way that I became more of a, not even an expert, but where I could know more, and I could do some Ayurvedic coaching after that. And I could consider myself someone who like, you know, specializes, maybe would be a right word, in like, you know, lifestyle habits from an Ayurvedic perspective, like where I could teach courses or classes and things like that, was not from my 200-hour training, but it was from like what came after that. But I 100% needed that exposure and that baseline of study and training before making the decision to go deeper with my time and money and resources and all that kind of stuff, doing an Ayurvedic training later. But Ayurveda was a huge part of it. We got into partner yoga, which was really, really fun. Although we were learning how to teach Ashtanga Vinyasa, that style, we got into learning about yin yoga and restorative yoga. And, you know, there was just so much philosophy and anatomy and really, really cool stuff. We got to learn more about the Yoga Sutras through chanting in the morning during the fire ceremonies. We did like a group read of the Bhagavad Gita, like as the training was going on, and we had a final on it at the end, I remember, which was nerve-wracking and cool. And, you know, there's just so many other things too. We got into like ethical guidelines. We got into like a little bit of like the business of yoga, which is like so outdated now. Like I definitely could not refer back to, you know, these notes in the book I'm looking through right now, because none of it would be relevant for this day and age, but it's cool to see and cool to look back on. And yeah, we like just got really deep into meditation and, you know, all kinds of stuff. So the 200-hour was a really kind of fun, well-rounded experience. And from there, I was able to, we finished, we graduated, and I ended up, after the teacher training certification, I moved, got myself back home to Fresno, and my then boyfriend and I moved out from our roommate, got our own place, and I was more and more and more pregnant, and he and I ended up getting married, and I started teaching. I started teaching right away. And you know what it was is I think I was like teaching a kids camp. There was someone who's teaching a kids camp when I got back in like August, and she couldn't make the last two sessions for some reason. Something came up in her life. And so it was just like, Kellee, you just got certified. Like, can you, you know, teach these last two days? Like, you know, I was kind of like that last resort situation. I was like, yes, absolutely. And I was like, I'm about to have a kid, so sure, I'll be around kids. That's fine. So I did that, and that was a really cool experience. And then I remember in September, the studio owner asking me if I could sub and if I could sub for her. And I remember being like so nervous, but it was not for one of her classes, which I would have been really nervous about, trying to like live up to that. But there was another like newer teacher who was teaching like a 6 a.m. once a week, and it didn't have a lot of people in the class. I remember the student base was like for that class like a little bit older, and like they were like really sweet older ladies, and I went to take over that class. The person who was teaching it before just couldn't teach it anymore. So she needed me to fill in for it while I could before I had my kid, which Starla wasn't due until January of 2011. So, you know, as long as I was feeling good in my pregnancy, like I could sub for a long time. So I took that on, and like it was early, so it wasn't a packed out class. It was these really sweet older women, like I said, and they were like really patient with me, and they were really like doted on me and my belly, and I always just felt so loved. Like they would just bring me things like little treats and stuff, and like always ask me how I'm doing, and they give me really constructive feedback, not too critical where I like made me freak out, but honest enough to where I could grow. And I just remember like loving it right away. So like I essentially started teaching immediately. And then I taught all the way up until I gave birth. I even remember the day that I gave birth, the whole day, there was someone who came in for a therapeutic yoga immersion. It was like a 2-day thing. And her name's Sherry Clampett, and she's kind of really like an expert in that kind of field of therapeutics and yoga. And the day I went into labor and ended up having Starla, I did this like all day yin workshop with her. Yin is like where you're pretty much grounded, you're like opening, it's deep stretching, it's very meditative. And I just remember like loving that class. But I was doing yoga all the way up until the very end. I was still taking like the owner of the yoga studio's advanced class, even with my huge belly and all that kind of stuff. So I just am very blessed and fortunate I had a good pregnancy, but like up into the day. And then I had Starla, and luckily I had a really awesome birth. I labored at home. When I got to the hospital, I was already dilated to a 10, and I had her. I just had her. Like I just not a lot of or any really medical intervention at all. I don't even think we had the time to like completely fill out all the paperwork in the triage like area where you wait, because like I started having her. So yeah, it was just a really easeful birth, and I'm like definitely thinking that had a lot to do with like all the yoga and like the meditation. And I know you could do all the yoga meditation in the world, and that doesn't mean you're going to have like a perfect birth story, but I do think that contributed to my really good birth story. Anyways, I took the 4 weeks off that's recommended for, you know, someone who delivers uh, vaginally, and I took those 4 weeks off and just took my time with my body and myself, and learning how to be in my new body and all that good stuff. And I started right after that teaching a postnatal. It was like a pre/postnatal class once a week at the studio. Like that's what I got back into, and I like got my footing there, and then gradually would sub a little bit here and there, and then as like I really had my bearings, I taught a little bit more regularly, and it ended up working out really good for my lifestyle because I could just be home and be like the primary caregiver to my daughter, and I could schedule my classes around times where like my mother or my, you know, ex-mother-in-law could come in, and like they would literally come to the yoga studio and just like hold star out, there was this big comfy couch in the lobby, and they would just like hang out with her out there while I would teach. So I would just be able to like breastfeed her right before and after if I had to. And it was just really, really beautiful, and it worked with my lifestyle. And so some of you might be thinking, whatever happened to that world market job? Yeah, I was at teacher training and I was 1 week in, and one of those moments where I told you I had this like question on my heart and then I got an answer or something like that in my sleep when I was sleeping in the guru's room. That guru came to me and he told me, quit that job. You're not going to need that. I had a really, this word is overused, so please don't sue me, but toxic, like a really toxic boss. Like she was just mean. She was really mean to me. She would like say mean things under her breath. Just one really quick story. I remember someone came in asking for some help in the lighting department, and I went over there, and I don't know, it was like right before I left and I was very newly pregnant. So I don't know if it was like pregnant brain or whatever, but I could not for the life of me find what they were asking for. And so I was like, you know what? Follow me. I'm going to walk and find my boss because I don't want to waste any more of your time. And I'm going to have her show both of us so then I can learn and you can know, because in our system, it shows that this shell lighting that you want is definitely here. So I go and I ask her, and she's like, yeah, follow me. So I'm following her, and it's me and it's the customer, and we're walking just like right behind her. And she takes us over. She points straight to where it was, which, yeah, I like just looked right past it. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, thank you, thank you. And she smiles at the customer, and the customer's kind of like looking at their options and like looking at the lighting feature that they want to buy. And we start to walk away. We are not even out of earshot of this customer's like vicinity. And she's like, you're such an idiot. It was right there. It was right in front of your face. I was just like, who says that? Who says that? She was a very kind of sarcastic person, and I think, I don't know if, like, there was a lot of people who worked there had pretty thick skin and they would kind of poke at each other and it was fun, but I don't know if I really have thick skin like that. And she and I definitely didn't have that dynamic. I'm kind of rambling now, but anyways, that happened. So, and I wasn't making a lot of money from this job or anything like that. It was like just enough to get by. But in one of those naps and those moments where a question on my heart was answered, it was the guru being like, yeah, you got to get out of that. That is like toxic. So I woke up from that nap. I had a little bit of time before our philosophy section started. I called her. I won't say her name, but I said, manager, I quit. I know I asked for a month. Thank you for getting to me off, but I'm actually not coming back. And so I just wanted to let you know as soon as possible, so you have like 3 weeks to hire someone else, but there's just no way I'm coming back. And she's like, what? You're quitting? I'm like, yes, I'm quitting, and you'll never see me again. So dramatic. And she was like, well, what about like the stuff in your locker? I was like, burn it. That might have been the hormones coming out, or my Scorpio moon. I don't know. But yeah, I never went back. And it wouldn't have worked anyways, that job, and like being a new mom, and being the person that was primarily home with my kiddo. But teaching yoga just happened to be like the perfect thing. And you know, I feel very like nostalgic right now because like Star is 13, and essentially she and I have been together just as long as I have been on this journey and road of being a teacher training, which a yoga teacher who happens to do teacher training, but where I've been on this road of teaching. Like, it is my calling to be not just like a mother, but it's been my calling, and it is my calling to be Starla's mother. And it's a calling for me to share the practice of yoga. And those two things are like the deepest callings of my life. They are so intrinsic to and fundamental to my purpose. And they're such a huge part, both things, of like my story, that it makes my heart just melt to think like that my life really started with that first 200-hour training. It really, really, really did. And like my life as like, you know, who I am now, which happens to be mother, you know? Um, so it's it's just really, really cool. It's really cool. And I know that so many other people, like I haven't got on Facebook in a very long time, but I got on Facebook to dig out some old photos. And so I saw some other people like in the group photo from teacher training who I haven't really kept up with anyone, honestly, but I like kind of geeked out trying to look at some of their Facebook pages, and just seeing like where like teaching has taken them is so like really cool and beautiful. And I know that I am not the only one with, I have my own unique story, of course, but I'm not the only one where like their whole lives changed with that initial decision to take a 200-hour yoga teacher training. And I wonder like what your stories are with that. Like, how did it shift and change your life? Or how will it? How could it? How would it? It's really cool to think about. So if you are on the fence about doing a 200-hour yoga teacher training, of course, you just heard me rant and rave, but I would say, you know, set your expectations to let it be a deeply transformative process that is like, you know, a spark that will eventually grow into a much bigger flame. Know that you don't have to be an expert to take a 200-hour. And in fact, you are going to be exposed to so many different things, and you get to decide what really speaks to you. And then you get to decide how and when you go deeper in those areas. But your 200-hour yoga teacher training is meant to give you a very wide introduction, and also at the same time give you a foundation where you can 100% confidently guide a 1 hour yoga class or whatever it is. But it's really what a 200-hour yoga teacher training is it's a start. It's a start. And it's a really exciting start. And there's so many directions and avenues that branch off from there. So who is a 200-hour yoga teacher training for? It's for anyone who wants to deepen their practice. It's for anyone who wants to not only deepen their practice, but teach, you know, and that's the thing. And you never know what's going to happen. Like, I knew I wanted to teach with this. I didn't know how soon that was going to start. I really knew I wanted to teach. But I've definitely seen a lot of people just be like, yeah, I just want to deepen my practice. And then they go on to be these like renowned yoga teachers. And then I also know of people who are like, yeah, I'm absolutely going to teach and try it out. And then are actually like, nope, not for me. So it can go either way. So I definitely don't think that your decision should hinge on if you're going to teach or not. It's like, if you feel like the practice of yoga in its entirety, like all the limbs, all 8 limbs, and not just asana, is something that is part of your calling for personal or professional, spiritual reasons, for any of those reasons, then you're going to get something out of this journey. So yeah, you can deepen a personal practice. You can deepen your understanding of the philosophy and history behind yoga. You can learn to teach and how to share yoga with others in a safe way. It's definitely going to be an opportunity for massive personal growth and self-discovery. So there's so many benefits beyond actually becoming a teacher. It's just your ability to enhance, uh, your mindfulness, to build like a sense of community of like-minded people, of gaining confidence in your voice. And so while we do a lot of practice teaching and that kind of stuff within the training itself, even someone who does not expect to go and teach to a group, you are still required to do the practice teaching, all these things, because you're gaining so much more when you're developing your voice and you're developing this presence and how to lead. You'll get something out of it. So we are coming up on the 1 hour mark for this episode. So I do want to put a little bookend on it at some point, because I can just like keep raving and keep raving. But I think I'll end it here. And I hope that you enjoyed kind of listening to a little bit of my backstory with that training. And maybe we'll talk about other trainings in the future, that kind of stuff. But if you feel in any way, shape, or form like this could potentially be something that you want to explore, then please join us for the 200-hour yoga teacher training with Tower Yoga info meeting. That's happening if you're listening in real time when this episode drops. That's Friday, the 23rd. Then we're having a meeting in the Lotus Room from 6 to 7 p.m. where we answer all your questions, those kinds of things. If you can't make it, or if you're not listening to this in real time, we are recording it. So you can always email us at hello@toweryogafresno.com for that link. Alrighty. I thank you for listening. If you made it this far, I really, 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 really hope to see you at the next teacher training, or maybe another one in the future. Bye-bye.